Vive el fútbol en todas partes con Móvil ETV. Desde tu primera recarga a partir de 5,000 pesos. Porque ahora con tu SIM Supersónica ETV te damos regalos más cargados de datos, minutos, llamadas por WhatsApp y mensajes de texto. Llama ya al 018-12-7777. ETV, prepago mundial, cobertura nacional. Aplican términos y condiciones en etv.com.
Blog Talk Radio.
Well, here we are, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, the Pigskin Preview, and let me tell you something. These guys have been doing it for quite some time. These guys are the bar, along with a couple other great shows, as we try to get all the stable shows on the same level here in the stables. And, boy, I'll tell you, they've worked their butt off. They've revamped it. They've done a lot. They've got it all over the place. They'll talk about their other site they got it on. But this thing launches blogtalkradio.com/Mancini Sports. After the show, you can listen to it on iTunes. Search Mancini. It'll be right up there. Also, XM 203, Sirius 214, SB Nation, American Forces Network. That brings it all the way around. 347-205-9631. I know there's some listeners in New York now listening. I believe Captain Jet's out there listening, if I can see him out there. A couple other guys got the 973 area codes. I don't know if they're taking calls. I better give it to their leader as we give it over to him, Chris Rose. And as you give him the mic, the podium, and the red carpet, Chris, that's off to you.
Thank you, sir. It's good to be back. We've had to take a bit of a spring break, but now after the draft, we are back, folks. So we'll be here every Tuesday night, as we were all the last few years. And it is the Pigskin Preview on Mancini Sports, and we're getting started here. We also have some stuff a little bit different since the last time you heard us. We have started the Knucklehead Podcast Network. So if we ever have a problem here, you can find us there. That's at Spreaker.com/@NuckPods. That's KNUCKPODS. We are at NuckPods on Twitter as well as Facebook. And you can always find us at Knucklehead Podcast, knuckleheadpodcasts@gmail.com. Excuse me, a little something in my throat here. But it's NFL season. It's finally starting to become NFL season. It feels real now because we have draft picks, we have rosters, we have people out in the field with cleats and helmets on. So you know me, it's starting to get a little bit giddy, getting happy. This is the time of the year that we all wait for. This is the time of year that it starts to get real. So one thing, having your favorite sport be the sport with the shortest season is torturous. But baseball, basketball, and hockey can only do so much if you're an NFL head. So we're getting started here, and we need to we have some people listening, some friends listening. We want to shout out Mark Mancini's friend who's listening in the car right now. He's given us some love, so I want to say hi to him. We're going to start off with some breaking news. For those of you who've been at work all day, Mark Ingram was just suspended for 4 games for PED use. So it's something I want to talk about just a little bit. It's about the Saints, and as I was doing my research on the Saints, it popped up that Mark Ingram is down. Now it looks like they have accidentally found Alvin Kamara as a bell cow back. It wasn't the intent. They do have some other guys, but that's not the way that Sean Payton likes to run his offense. But it looks like he has no choice. So I mean, it's tough to be a running back when you get to that age to really keep it going. So I'm not one of those people that judges. But I don't know, Baltimore Blaine, what do you think about the Saints losing one of their bell cow backs?
Well, that last year the Saints came with a double-headed threat with Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. And it's sad that, I guess I can't say it's sad. It's more of a complicated thing with these PEDs apparently. And so many things or a combination of things can set off the meter and, get you in trouble even when you think you're not doing anything wrong. I hope that this wasn't intentional. I think it's going to definitely weaken them for 4 games, but then again, we don't know what's going to happen in training camp, who they're going to find as far as drafted and undrafted free agents, or in the June 1st cuts. Maybe they can bring somebody in. I'm not worried about them, though. You still got Drew Brees under center. That offense was potent before they started with the running game. It was just a different dynamic. So I think it's not really going to set them back at this point. I'm not really worried about it. What do you think, Mr. Hersh?
Well, what can I say? Losing a valued player is bad news for the Saints. I don't know whether it's going to hurt them or not, but it's got to be bad news. And I agree with you. I think this performance-enhancing drug issue is more complicated than it seems, because you'd think if the players could figure it out, they just would stay away from that stuff to avoid the suspensions. So at this point, for me, it's kind of hard to tell. Did he violate it on purpose and try to get away with something, or did he get caught up in something that he wasn't even aware was against the rules? It's a big issue, and I don't have the answers to that, but I don't see how the Saints are going to benefit from this in any sense of the term.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to benefit, but I think if there's any team that can ride this out, can ride out losing your number one running back, and some people would argue that he's not the number one running back anymore, but I think if there's any team that could ride it out with all the weapons that team has on it now, that offense has one of the best offensive lines. You have Kamara, who can run between the tackles, can do all the stuff out of the backfield, but just I think they're worried about the wear and tear of a full season. I think the Saints can weather this storm. If anything, maybe it's a blessing in disguise, and Ingram comes back fresh. It'll all depend on what he does on his off time. It's nothing like playing football. It's not football shape, but I think if there's any team that can weather this storm, it would be them. But I definitely agree with you, Mr. Hersh. There is no positive. There's no full positive to losing a back like that. And the fact that it's 4 games means that he's been busted various times in the past. So, the next one could be a big one. And as he gets later in his career, it only becomes more more tempting to try and get away with it. Let's go back to Mr. Hersh, and then we'll jump back to Baltimore Blaine.
Well, I was thinking about the wear and tear issue, and it's just not for the season. I think one of the reasons why Sean Payton likes to rotate these guys is so that they can come in fresh. Sometimes they can have a 2-back scheme if they want to, but most of all, to keep them fresh throughout the game. And this is going to be a big change for Alvin Kamara if he has to play through the whole game. And he may be gassed at the end.
Well, I'm sorry. Were you finished, Mr. Hersh?
I was passing.
I was.
Oh, okay. Oh, it was Chris. I heard. My thing is, it's easy to jump to conclusions here. I know Ingram's had injuries in the past, and your first thought is, he's trying to get above, trying to get a little head start or above the curve on healing, or whether he was trying, or competition. It was interesting to me just to see how many of these suspensions and how many of these violations, how they occurred, what was taken that set it off. Maybe we can get an expert here in a future show to, who has more insight on just how the testing is administered and what they're looking for, and what would set it off. But I agree with you, Mr. Hersh. It could wear down the one back. They don't have a bye until week 6. He'll be gone for the first 4 weeks. He'll be eligible to come back in week 5. So, and it's the early part of the year. I imagine he still has the possibility of appealing. I haven't seen anything about whether he'll appeal or not. And if he appeals, they might knock that down a game or two. It is his first suspension, so that's a possibility.
Yeah, they have the kid that they picked up last year in the draft from Maryland. So it's not like it's just going to be Alvin. If he gets hurt, they have no one back there. And I'm sure, it's still early. They might pick someone else up just in case. But once again, it's tough. And go back to your point, Blaine. I think a lot of it has to do just recovery. It's 16, or if you go to the playoffs, even more weeks straight of just, car accident after car accident type of beating on your body in that off season. A lot of times people want to get stronger. They want to build up muscle. They want to recuperate. They want to get that recovery. And there's a lot of things out there that can help with that. There's a lot of things that can help you work out longer, that can help give you energy if you kind of get out of shape and want to get back into it. There's a lot of different reasons. So I'm not going to pretend to have any clue as to what or why he's using something. There's also other stuff that can set off positives, like things that are used to mask other chemicals, or things that are used to clean out your system, or things that are used for a whole bevy of reasons. The testing policy in the NFL is far from perfect and needs to be overhauled in a big way. And something that I know is close to your heart. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Chris. And I think that's what I was trying to get to was in my rambling, was that we take it for granted that the NFL testing is straightforward, that these guys know what they're supposed to take, what they're not supposed to take. I'd like to get into what exactly, how they handle this, as far as do they give a list of banned substances? Because as you said, there are certain vitamins, there are certain supplements, and a combination of them can set off, trigger a red flag and a violation, and from what I've heard.
Yeah, I know there's a bunch of stuff, but it's very difficult for someone to go through all that and read all that. And at the same time, if you're paying a professional and he starts giving you powders and pills and gels and whatever, drinks while you're working out, I don't think that people really have the ability or the time or the expertise to go through and say, okay, has this been checked? Are you sure? Sometimes these non-FDA approved things can have other stuff in them that might set something off. I think that's a great teaser for a show down the line. And I think we're going to do our best to get an expert in here for you guys and make sure that we bring that to you, because I think that is something that's really big, as well as the fact that I know something that Blaine and I feel strongly about, the Kyle Turley thing with marijuana and how that affects can be really helpful to some people and cut down on the opioid use in the NFL for pain, as well as after the career ends in the league. Those are all things that we want to talk about leading up to the season this year, and we're going to try and get in some qualified people, so it's not just us, reading off of articles or giving our opinions. We're going to try and get some experts in here. So talking about people who just keep rattling stuff off on the radio and on different mediums without thinking, Mr. Ben Roethlisberger. So I've been talking long enough. I know Mark just got back, Mr. Mark Hersh. So we're going to talk to Mr. Mark Hersh and Baltimore Blaine about this. We talked a little bit about this on the Friday Mess Around show over on the Knucklehead Network. And we also talked about it on XM 203 Friday night. I just cannot believe I had kind of thought that he had, since, the rape accusations and the motorcycle, he got married, and I thought he was a little bit better than last year. The wishy-washy playing with the fans and the front office emotion on whether he's going to quit or not. And they draft a kid, and he just comes out like a little kid, just come out of his room because someone took his toy that he didn't want to play with. I mean, it's insane how much disrespect he is showing his teammates and his team. I just can't get over it. I've already gone off on this. I apologize. Mr. Hersh?
Yeah, well, I think anybody that's been listening to us over a period of time knows what I've said over and over and over again about Ben Roethlisberger, and I'm not even talking about what he's saying about having another quarterback coming in there, not to mention the fact that he was talking about retiring last year, and not to mention the fact that he's a big boy and his legs keep going out on him, and he is lucky if he can even finish the season, and not to mention, because, I'm surprised that Ben Roethlisberger is still going to stay in there. Much less, he should be jumping for joy that somebody's coming up behind him. Last season, he almost acted as if, well, I'll play because they don't have anyone else, and I'm loyal to the team, and here we go. What can I say? I've said it all over and over and over again, and this is just another chapter in this. I don't understand this man. I don't understand why he has any reason to, start talking in any kind of way, much less a negative one. Blaine?
Yeah, if you listen to the Mess Around show on Friday, that we put out on Saturday, actually. You heard my rant about this, but I'll just rehash it here a little bit. Here's a guy who claimed last year that he wanted to retire, that he wanted to spend time with his kids, that, you know, made it sound like he had to be forced to basically to play because they had nobody else. And all the fans, Pittsburgh fans I talked to, have been concerned for the last few years about Ben not being able to, something happens to Ben, what are we going to do? You know, you had, what's his name, Landry. That apparently that's not working out. I forget the guy that they drafted last year or the year before, and I haven't heard anything about him since. So now you get Mason Rudolph, you know, drafted in the second round, and Ben has a problem with it. Now, last year he acted like he didn't want to play, both on the field and off the field for half of the year. Now all of a sudden he wants to be a Tom Brady and play for the next 4 or 5 years, which is not going to happen. So he's attacking this guy or attacking the team's decision to draft this guy in such a negative way, and then goes back and tweets more, trying to clean up the mess he made with the first tweets. And folks, if you haven't figured it out yet, there is no way, I don't know anybody whose life has become better because of Twitter. So, you know, think before you tweet, because it goes out there, and now you find you have to clean all this stuff up. And he sounded even more like a baby, talking about that Mason Rudolph is, you know, where is he going to be in the depth chart? We should have gotten somebody that could help us now. Well, Freudian slip. Ben, if somebody hits you the wrong way, if you go out of the game, who's going to be under center? Okay? So, you know, this is just ridiculous, man. Just like you said, Chris, it's like acting like a kid who, you know, lost his toy to nobody, you know, that he doesn't play with. You know, somebody else comes in and picks it up. But anyway, enough of that.
Well, I think, Blaine, you brought up an interesting point, and I kind of segued this into the XM show with Chris on Friday. XM 203, Sirius 214, SB Nation, American Forces Network, anybody that we cross-promote on blogtalkradio.com/Mancini Sports, the Stables, Knucklehead Podcasts, iTunes, the whole network across the board. The platform is huge. And what we basically said is, you know, it's kind of like the Stables guys, and I brought up this, you know, same kind of segue is Big Ben, you know, is standing there. He wants to retire, talking about retiring. Then he thinks, you know, he's going to come back and he's going to, you know, tell the front office he's coming back. Don't draft a quarterback. Well, they draft a quarterback, and now you have a problem with it. It's almost like the Stables guys. If we have a problem with guys doing other shows or putting them up on other things, then we're being selfish. We're desensitizing people's opinions. We're making people robots. And I've always looked at stuff in life when people put up those kind of barriers, they're just discouraging people from giving the 100%. Now somebody wants to give 20%. Here you got a kid in here that's going to eventually take your job. Why don't you mentor him? Show him the ropes. Give him the scouting reports on some teams. You know, I just don't understand it. That same situation has happened in Pittsburgh now, and I know this is the Pigskin Preview, and, you know, we have a hockey show here, but that same problem happened in Pittsburgh with a couple goalies, and the one goalie kind of took the other goalie under his wing and mentored him, and that goalie took his job, and the other goalie went to Vegas, and now he's chasing a cup again. So, and meanwhile, that other goalie that took that guy under his wings won, 3 cups. So I don't know what Big Ben's doing. I think it's just a selfish act. Same thing with Brady, with Garoppolo in New England, and then, you know, Garoppolo goes to San Francisco, and I think Garoppolo is going to be a great quarterback. But I just think it's selfish, and on 2 great quarterbacks, Brady and Big Ben, that you got to be able to realize somebody's going to take your job eventually. So why don't you just open up the door and let them come in instead of standing them outside? You know, and we're based on this. It's just crazy. Meanwhile, as I segue out of that one, talking about the draft, I know we brought up the draft the other day on the XM show and stuff, and I know you guys talked about it. I might be the only guy in this table here that doesn't think Baker Mayfield's going to last. And when I look at quarterbacks that come out of that college in that conference, whether it's a Vince Young, whether it's a Sam Bradford and stuff, I just think they have a heck of a time grasping the NFL. And I could be wrong on this, but it's just my opinion. Baker Mayfield in Baltimore Blaine can tell you, Baker Mayfield is probably going in the toughest division in football. This is a defensive division where they hit, and they hit hard. Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Cincinnati will not hit you a few times. They will hit you 4 or 5 times. And maybe that's why the Browns quarterbacks have not lasted there. And this guy is going to be thrown in the realm of things here. So I think Baker Mayfield is going to have a problem. I think the Browns should have drafted Saquon Barkley, but the first pick came in with the 4th pick, took the best quarterback, I think, in the draft, would have been Josh Rosen. If you keep him focused, this guy could do some damage, and I think he'll do damage in, Arizona with the Cardinals. So learning from those guys and having a couple good receivers. I was hoping he'd drop down into Redskins, but he didn't. But I really think this kid, I think when you look at the Browns and the Bears in particular, I don't understand their draft picks. Maybe somebody can help me. But I think, and I'm going to give props where props are due, I think Baltimore going to steal with that quarterback. Lamar Jackson's good. He'll be another Flacco there. I really think he's going to be a wonder. And I didn't want to see him end up with the Ravens, but he did. I think the Ravens got a great pick. I'm not too familiar with Chubb too much. I like what the Raiders did. The Raiders are loading up. They picked up McTavius Bryant from Pittsburgh. They got a lot of targets. Jordy Nelson from Green Bay there. Amari Cooper. They picked up Miller, I believe, from UCLA with the 7th pick. So I think the Raiders did good. Gruden's going to be there. I'll tell you guys, and I know, Chris kind of laughed at it, but I've got the Rams Raiders or the Vikings Raiders for the Super Bowl. And you know how I throw those early season picks. Chris, as you break down the Ben Roethlisberger thing, as I looked at the draft, I know you're high on Baker Mayfield. I am not. I don't know what everybody's seeing that I'm not, but this division he's going to, watch out. They can knock you around silly.
Blaine, I think you want to respond to that, right?
Yeah, well, I do like Baker Mayfield, but I do see what you're saying, Mr. Mancini. It is a tough division, but I would say I would make it even further that any of these quarterbacks is going to be tough. It's going to be tough to make it in this division, just because for the facts that you said. I like Baker Mayfield and the fact that I like his accuracy. I like his cockiness. I don't like Josh Rosen's cockiness because he sounds more negative and selfish. In order to motivate himself, I guess. I don't know. But I do like the fact that Baker Mayfield comes into the league thinking he's the top quarterback. You got to have that attitude. You got to, think that you at least make everybody else think that you believe in yourself. He's one quarterback that I paid the most attention to as far as watching him throw, and the guys, I just loved his accuracy. Again, of course, I didn't see it against the NFL competition. That has to be, we'll wait to see that. But I'm just going to leave that at that and go to Mr. Rose.
Yeah, well, I'll try not to completely give everything we've talked about away. We're going back to the draft because we finally got Mr. Hersh back from his birthday journey, and my best, and Mr. Mancini as well. But my best, my grade A, top A+, whatever you want to call it, draft team was the Packers. So we're going to get into that in a second. But I will say, I will review what I've talked about, and I've given this answer on various shows over the last couple of weeks. I think that Baker Mayfield ran an offense that, while it wasn't a true spread, it had a lot of different aspects to it. He's had to learn a few things. He's very talented. He has the build of a smaller quarterback. I mean, he's almost the exact same size as Drew Brees. No, I'm not saying he's the next Drew Brees. Don't relax, folks. But what I'm saying is a lot of people, those guys never get picked in the first round in the past, Russell Wilson's, Drew Brees', because of the fact that they're too short. A lot of the football guys, quote unquote, don't like that style. I think as far as what he did, he was He was a little bombastic on the field, and I say this, and I've said it over and over again. I think people still have a Manziel hangover, and that every time someone acts out, especially college, he almost looks the same, they put that Manziel tab on him, and I think that that's interesting to me. But it came out today, and something that Browns fans, I think, is a good sign for you, is that they said, A, Tyrod is starting no matter what, and B, the management decision is that Hugh Jackson's the head coach, but the offense, Todd Haley has full autonomy over the entire offense, and he's going to be running it, which I think maybe is a precursor, especially considering they didn't tell him who the first pick was going to be until a day before the draft because they didn't trust him for whatever reason. I think that's kind of a precursor to Hugh being out. This is just kind of he's in a holding pattern, just like John Fox was after a similar situation last year at the draft. But I like the fact that he gets to start behind Tyrod. They definitely give him a bunch of weapons. I mean, he's loaded there on that team. So I think he's actually in a place where a lot of other Cleveland quarterbacks haven't been in the past 15 years. I did go on, when we first talked about this right after the draft, and we did the coaches show on draft day, I was a little bit iffy, and I've had some time to kind of process. I think, Mancini, you're right that Rosen's going to be the first one to start. That's just because the Jets don't have anyone else. I think he's going to get knocked around, and he might get the Carr effect, where if he loses his confidence too early, he already has a problem trying to fit balls into places and causing turnovers. If he gets knocked around and starts getting happy feet, that might be a horrible way to start the career. Rosen, I mean, he's got a good setup there, but I think that after talking to people, Chris Taylor kind of got me on this too. I don't think he's pro ready. I don't think he's that great of a quarterback, but I think he's an amazing athlete. Talking about Lamar Jackson going down to Baltimore, and I think that his setup situation there behind Flacco for a year or two, it's like if someone would have taken the time to hone Vic is what he could turn into. So I think he's got the highest upside. Sorry about that long rant there, but Mr. Hersh, welcome back. What'd you see when you were flying around looking at the drafts and looking at these quarterbacks?
Well, as you know, I've always been the first one to say that all of these draft choices are iffy because you really don't know how they're going to do in the NFL. And it's a different ball game from college football, and they all come in and they all are the best, and especially there's so much talk about the quarterbacks. Quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield, Rosen, it just goes on and on and on. And that's natural because teams need quarterbacks to run their offensive scheme. But really, if you look back, how many of these great quarterbacks ever became that before they ever played, when they were coming out of the draft, ever ended up being really great quarterbacks after their careers had gone by? And I think, many are called, but few are chosen. So, but I agree with you, Chris Rose, that the Browns are getting more and more loaded every day. I thought the Browns are going to do a lot better than they did last year, and I opened my mouth and I predicted that they were going to win a few more games than they did, and it turned out I was wrong, so I'm kind of shying away from that. But I think they got a lot of pieces in play. They had a great position in the draft. They had a ton of salary cap money, so away we go. What can I say? Time will tell. And all of these quarterbacks are going to get a chance, I think, to play during the year. And I think especially Rosen, because he's over there at the Cardinals and he's behind Sam Bradford, who may limp off the field in the first game. So we'll see what happens. And once again, you just can't predict how these guys are going to do once they get in the real deal.
Hey, can I butt in here for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say we understand that we have a lot of listeners listening in. Some want to call in. This is not a call-in show. What we would like you to do is just email us your responses and your questions, and we'll take some time to read some good questions on the air here if you have them. Mr. Rose, could you give them that email address, please.
Yes, sir. That is knuckleheadpods@gmail.com. So that's knucklehead singular pods with an S at gmail.com. And, we'll answer those emails as quick as we can. Ideally, once we start picking up again and we have all of you guys writing in like we always have during the season, we're going to try and write back to you, and as well as answer your questions in advance. So if you give us some time, that we're going to try and actually do some work for you, because we appreciate you, and research and make some of your questions or topics of the show. So once again, that's knuckleheadpods@gmail.com.
Folks, I passed it off to Chris because I always mess it up. Good job.
and I love reading those emails. So come on, send them in. We love it. Give us emails. Knuckleheadpods@gmail.com.
Yeah,
and we're on Twitter. We're on Twitter at the Nucks. At Nucks. I'm sorry. At Nucks. See, I told you I always mess it up. I always
KNUCKPODS. And the one reason why I said Twitter never did anything good, I disagree, because I don't write a lot on there, but I filter through hundreds of tweets from some of the industry's best people in sports and post them there. So it's I have some of my friends that follow it just so that they can see what's going on in the news, because it kind of cuts through a lot of the Google gargle, and I don't repost the same story 20 times. So you can kind of get on there, find some funny stuff, find some cool stuff, some great pictures, videos of past games, and links to some of the best in the industry. So,
Chris, you redeemed us. You redeemed us because I just now we can get Twitter as a sponsor, because I blew it.
Well, one of the first things you can do is write in and trash Blaine for his plug of the new network.
I was just drunk on Twitter. So that's all.
Just drunk on Twitter. So we've been waiting for Mr. Hersh to get back, and we're actually going to give him a feature. We're going to turn this over to him, because I have to admit that I think that they had the best draft in the NFL this year. I love what they did. I'm not going to get into it. I'm just going to pass it right over to our good friend, Mr. Hersh, and happy belated from all of the Pigskin Preview crew to you.
Well,
Yay!
Thank you, Chris Rose. And I did have a nice little vacation, about a week and a half, out in sometimes sunny California. There was a little bit of clouds out there, but yeah, I'm back now, and I have to agree with you. I was very happy with the Packers draft. And not only was I happy with the draft, but I was happy that the new head coach, Brian Gutekunst, had taken some moves in the free agency as well. And it was things that we needed. We picked up Jimmy Graham, tremendous tight end, who was apparently loose to be gotten. And that's one thing that the Packers have not had in a while, was a top-quality tight end. Welcome to Jimmy Graham. We're going to be very happy to have him, and he's going to do a great job for us. He's going to be down there in the end zone, and I think he's going to take the place, quite frankly, of Jordy Nelson, who was an end zone whiz for quite a while, until after his ACL he lost a step, and I think maybe that's why he was gone. But we also picked up in free agency Mohammed Wilkerson, a defensive end, and I still think he's got a lot of juice left. And that is just what the Packers need, is a little bit of a pass rush there. I love Julius Peppers, and we lost him back to his home Panthers, where he wanted to end his career, and I don't blame him for that, but we needed some help there, and we got some. So kudos to the general manager, Brian Gutekunst, who took a step out into free agency, which Ted Thompson wasn't prone to do. He liked to build up through the draft. And Mr. Chris Rose, do you have a little feedback on this now?
Yeah, before you get too far, I want to hit on something you just said, because I think it was an absolutely brilliant point. That one of the stats that we use in fantasy, we love Aaron Rodgers, is because you always look at the red zone. You know, you want to see if a quarterback throws or if they run. What do they do when they get down there? And no one in history has ever thrown to the end zone more in the red zone, and I call it, the pink zone or the green zone, whatever you want to call it. He's throwing to the end zone. And, I want to disagree with Mr. Mancini. I think the Raiders had an absolutely abysmal draft. I think Jordy was reaching to someone a little too late, and I think that the Packers got rid of him just in time because you can't get thrown open by Carr like he did with Rodgers. But I think that isolating Jordy on one-on-one out on the flank there is exactly what Seattle did with Graham last year, which is why Russell led the league in touchdowns and Jimmy led the league in tight end touchdowns and red zone targets. It's because if you get him out one-on-one, doesn't matter who it's against, it's over. With Rodgers throwing that ball up to where only the basketball player can get it, I think he's going to get double-digit touchdowns this year, no problem. I think it was a great pickup for the Pack. So why don't you guys keep going on the offense and what you're talking about there? I just want to jump in and say that was a brilliant point.
Well, thank you, Chris Rose, and I'm done with the free agency now. So I'm going to move to the draft. So I asked myself this question like more than 100 times over the last several years: where do the Packers most need the help? And the answer is crystal clear. They needed help in the defensive backfield. They needed help at the corners. They had one of the most abysmal records in the league for defensing the passing game. And so what do? And this was a surprise for me because I thought something else was going to happen, but, wait for it. They picked up Jerry Alexander as a cornerback out of Louisville, and this guy, he's short. He's only 5'10" and a quarter, but he's got a lot of game. He's up in the face of people. He's a talker, and he ran the 40-yard dash in 4.38. And I think that says a lot about the speed that he's bringing to that position. And I think it's going to be a win all the way around. I don't know how long it's going to take him to develop, but I think this guy's a keeper. And in the second round, Josh Jackson, another cornerback out of Iowa. And I thought this guy was a monster. And I was surprised that the Packers didn't take him in the first round. And I was even more surprised that nobody else took him, and the Packers were able to get him anyway. So that made me very happy. And he's a little bit taller. He's 6 feet tall. He ran a slow 40-yard at the combine at 4.56, but he was much better in the pro thing. He ran much faster, and he's got a lot of game, and this guy is really stacked. If you've seen a picture of him, this guy is all muscle, and I think he's going to do well jousting with the wide receivers. So that was a big thing for me, is the cornerback position, but the Packers are also getting a little bit weak at the pass rushing game. They picked up Oren Burks out of Vanderbilt, and he's been an outside linebacker, but I think he's probably going to start as an inside linebacker. And the Packers were trading around up and down, and it looked like they had let Oren Burks go when they traded down to get some more value in the later rounds, but they ended up getting him anyway. So I'm just getting started on this, but I'm going to pass it around and see what anybody has to say about all these defensive gets that we've got. Ha ha ha. Blaine, any comments?
Just before you jump in there, Blaine, I want to just for those of you who started listening to, I think it was our first or second Friday show that we just started a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about Josh Jackson and Hersh said, I wish we could get that guy. So, hey, we're procrastinators. You know what I mean? Help me out, Hersh. Prognosticated. That's the word I'm looking for. We told the future, and we called a second-round pick, man. And that's amazing. But, yeah, it was great. Sorry, Blaine. Go ahead.
And, Chris, where could they find that Mess Around show?
They can find it on www.spreaker.com/Nuckpot. And we have a couple shows, and we also record this and send it out, so you can find all our stuff on all over the place, all over all the platforms. Go ahead, Blaine.
Okay, yeah, I like the fact that the Packers, out of 11 picks, what did they do? 11 picks, they had 5 defensive players, I think it was a well-rounded draft. They even selected a punter and a long snapper. So it was like a very good, diverse draft there. They were addressing every issue. I like the pick of Jair Alexander, the first-round pick. Mainly, he became one of my favorite guys right off the bat when I saw his emotional response to Lamar Jackson being picked at the end of the first round by the Ravens. This guy and they were teammates at Louisville, and he stopped the interview and started dancing around and took off his mic, addressed the camera to give Lamar Jackson, congratulations. And if you haven't seen that, go to Google, do a search on Jair Alexander and the draft, and you'll find it. It was very raw, emotional, and real. But Mr. Hersh, out of these picks, I would like to know is there any of these draft picks that you've already talked about or about to talk about who stands out as your favorite that you think is going to make an immediate impact and are any of these guys really going to change that defense or offense and take it to the next level?
Well, I'm not going to talk about anything that I haven't talked about yet, but I'm very happy about the cornerback situation. I think, I've said so many times, you never know how a draftee is going to do in the big time, in the big league. But I think there's a lot of promise for both Jerry Alexander and Josh Jackson. So I'm very happy about those, as well as some of the picks for a pass rusher. And there's more coming later. And Mr. Chris Rose has something he wants to mention.
Yeah, I just want you to set up real quick. While you're going through your drafts, I want you to talk about the receiver you got. Because Buffalo made one of the more bonehead moves. We didn't even talk about Josh Allen. Buffalo moved up when they didn't have to. And your new GM, Kuntenfass, whatever his name is, got a good German name for being up in Wisconsin. He made a great move and got you guys a bunch of extra picks, and you guys picked up some receivers to battle for that 4th spot. I thought it was great.
Well, it was, and his name is Guntenkust, Brian Guntenkust. And it's even hard for me to say, but we got a couple of wide receivers that I think actually 3 of them that I think have some promise. And in the 4th round, we took Jamon Moore, and he came out of Missouri, 6'2" and 5'8", and the team is high on him. He ran a 4.6 40-yard at the combine, but he ran at 4.49 at Pro Day, and I think they're looking for good things from him. And we also picked up, and this guy's going to have the longest name on the back of the uniform of anybody. And this is in the 5th round, the Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's a big guy. He's a wide receiver. He's coming out of South Florida. He's 6'4", and he ran a 4.37 40-yard dash, so he's a speedster. And that's what we need out there. And, the wide receivers, they came later in the draft, and I think this is an old Ted Thompson trick, is to trade around and load up on picks and take a bunch of promising guys later on in the rounds and try to develop them into something that is working for the Packers. And I think most notably they've done that in the offensive line, Corey Lindsey, Jason Spriggs, on and on. These none of these were first-round picks. So the 3rd guy out of Notre Dame in round 6 is Equanimus St. Brown, wide receiver out of Notre Dame. So we picked up 3 wide receivers, and I think at least 1 or 2 of them are going to hit, because with the loss of Jordy Nelson, what did we have? We had Devontae Adams, we had Cobb, Geronimo Allison. There was some room for some new talent at the wide receiver coming in. And I think that hopefully one of these guys, or maybe even a couple of them, are going to rise to the occasion. So that does it for the wide receivers. Any questions?
Well, I think that you guys showed up. I mean, our team picked a punter too, but it looks like you guys are going after a lot of people that can play on special teams right away. The fact that you got, your long snapper and your punter is pretty crazy in a draft, something that doesn't get drafted usually. One of the receivers, we kind of talked about towards the end of the draft, you picked up someone that should have been better. Where's his name? Yeah, like the Equanimous pick, the ESB as they call him.
Equanimous St. Brown.
I think that people need to look at the difference in quarterback between Kaiser his junior year and then last year's quarterback who couldn't throw him open, and before you put on the tape and really judge him, because I think that the Packers might have got a steal right there. So that's something else I wanted to add. So getting out of the draft and just kind of going to how it affects the Packers, because I also like the linebacker, because you get your linebacking core, except for that new kid who I love, are a little bit long in the tooth. What's going on with the O-line and the Balaga situation? And I know they're talking about restructuring his contract. He's coming back. What's going on with the offensive line in Green Bay?
Well, that's a good question. And we did pick up an offensive lineman, Cole Madison, coming out of Washington State. And what the Packers are saying is that they think that he's going to play as a guard first, but that he's got flexibility. He could play tackle. He could play guard. And so, that's looking good. And what you said about picking up some of these special team guys, I think that the strategy there, and we all know that usually this goes in free agency, maybe even after the draft if these guys don't get picked up. But the Packers did pick up a punter out of Alabama. And, everybody knows how the Crimson Tide did last year, and J.K. Scott was part of that solution. And so they picked him up. It's going to give a little bit of competition in the camp. And the long snapper thing made a lot more sense to me, actually. Not that the picking up a punter didn't make sense, but our long snapper, Brett Good, he's 33 years old now. And we tried to transition to a younger player last year. The guy got hurt. They had to bring Brett back in there, and he's not getting any younger. And so we picked up Hunter Bradley as a long snapper. We also picked up a couple of, linemen. We got, I mentioned Oren Burks earlier. We picked up Kendall Donaldson out of Missouri State as a linebacker, a defensive end, James Looney out of California. So I think I'm pretty happy about this. I think that the general manager did what he needed to do with the defense. I think they need a lot of help there. Clay Matthews isn't getting any younger either, and we need some help there. And I think we got some guys that are going to be able to potentially give it to us, and only picked on the offense what was really needed and what was good and what was out there. So anyway, I think Blaine has a question about something I haven't talked about. Go ahead, Blaine.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your running game, Mr. Hersh. How is that? Does that improve your running game? Do you see that as improved, or how do you feel about that?
Well, I think we got some young guys that were drafted last year that actually turned out to be, in the later rounds at running back, that actually turned out to be pretty good. And we've got Montgomery, who transitioned from being a wide receiver to being a running back. I think that the team is showing that they have a lot of faith in the guys that they have, and I think that says a lot when you come into a draft and you don't try to, bolster anything. So I'm happy with our running backs, and I think that we have a stable of them, and we're going to do just fine.
Yeah, you got Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones.
Well, exactly, and those guys really did a good job last year. Surprisingly, better job than I think anybody thought they were going to do. What do you think about them? Did you get any chance to watch them out there in California?
Well, with the injuries you had last year, a lot of the games were. I don't think we could really track, or at least I couldn't, do an honest tracking of how effective that running game would be with Rodgers, without Rodgers there. I think that defenses were geared against the run for you because they weren't afraid of Hundley, and surely with Aaron Rodgers returning under a new contract, it looks like. We can touch on that if you want. That is going to, he's going to come back. I think that running game is going to flourish, just like with Drew Brees in New Orleans. That running game is going to enhance that offense to another level, and we'll see what these three running backs will be able to. Your stable of running backs will be able to do as far as challenge the Vikings in that division.
Well, when Aaron Rodgers is happy, everybody's happy in Green Bay. And I think he's going to be happy. He's going to get a new contract. He's got a new girlfriend. He just bought a piece of the Bucks. Aaron's going to be happy, and I think it's going to be good for everyone. So what is the chances for the Packers in their division? I think everybody is picking Minnesota is going to be at the top of the division, but I'm going to say it right here and now, don't be too sure. So, the Vikings, the Lions, and the Bears all were drafting players too. Chris Rose, what do you think?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that very quickly. I think there's some interesting drafts. Let's get over the first one that I think had a horrible draft, and we can kind of talk about them, and that's the Lions. I like the move. You go from kind of a soft milquetoast by NFL standards, I guess. Non-physical. I don't like the word finesse in the NFL because everyone still gets hit, but they're definitely not a down your throat kind of a team. They picked up Blunt. They got Matt Patricia in there as head coach. They look like they're going to, kind of start bruising. They did make some moves on the defensive side of the ball that I like. But to get Blunt, they already have some running backs there, and then they go out and they pick up another running back. I thought that was kind of a rough move. I have a helicopter here flying over me. I apologize. So why don't we go to Blaine until it passes over?
Okay, so I'm
talk
not
about
really
talk about the Lions.
Yeah, I'm not really impressed with the Lions off season so far. I don't see anything that makes me jump up and down for joy to say, oh, they got it now. They're really going to challenge for this division. But then again, we're still in the off season. I'm hoping to see. I like the Lions as a team. They're one of my I'm not going to say my favorite franchises, but they've always been. I've got ties to them. I'll be honest. I got a lot of friends who are Lions fans, and I pull for them. That they're not going to be burying their heads in the sand mid-season again. I really don't. Again, I don't really have much to say on them. The Lions find a way to disappoint every year. Maybe Mr. Hersh, you have something to say on the Lions?
Well, the Lions are the enemy, and the Packers want to beat the Lions every time they come into town or we go over there. But I've always had a healthy respect for Matt Stafford. I mean, he's a tough little guy. I mean, playing with his injuries and all that kind of stuff, but he hasn't seemed to have been able to push him over the top. And I haven't seen anything spectacular out of the draft with them. But one thing I will say is I'm very curious to see how Patricia does as a head coach and whether he's going to try to wear the head coach hat but really be a defensive coach. That's an interesting situation. And, what can I say? But there's two other teams that are in the division, and that would be the Vikings and the Bears. So, Chris Rose, what do you think about Minnesota?
Yeah, I think Minnesota took steps up, and don't forget all the pieces they're getting back. Especially Cook, who besides being on track for Rookie of the Year, probably could have made a run at MVP the way he was playing to start off the season. I mean, he was on fire. You have one of the best safeties in the game. They picked up Sheldon Richardson from the Seahawks. So that defense just got even stronger. That's another Pro Bowler they have on that team. In the draft, you look at what Minnesota did, and it's just they're at a point now where they're deep, so they can start picking players for moving forward, like to redshirt, to use the college term, where you have so much depth, people can play and they can learn. Now, they went out and they got a corner same time when they signed Terrence Newman, who's almost my age, who's still playing at a high level at corner. They're trying to shore up the offensive line with the rest of the picks. They got a blocking tight end. They went and got a kicker since they pawned off their kicker last year onto us and lost games. So I think what they did is just basically took a good team and put some building blocks behind it. The kids in Central Florida might turn out to be a star, but what they've done is they've just built depth. That team is dangerous. They're going to be dangerous for a long time. You guys all know how much I love Mike Sims. I think that they're going to be amazing. And with Cook now, they don't have McKinnon there anymore either. So if he can stay on the field, that's going to be one of those guys, especially folks who are fantasy. That's going to be huge next year. Go ahead, Mr. Hersh.
I think the big question mark for the Vikings has got to be Kirk Cousins. And obviously that was their biggest off-season move. And I just wonder if they made a big mistake. I guess time will tell. Their guy, their hero that got him almost all the way, he's over at Denver now. So I don't know. Kirk Cousins, that's a question mark, because if you don't have your number one guy running the team, what is going to happen? Will they be able to repeat the division championship? I think the odds in Las Vegas are going to say yes, but I say it all comes down to Kirk Cousins.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Kirk Cousins is not going to take this team any further than Case Keenum did. I still don't understand that move of moving away from Case Keenum. Of course, I wasn't in the locker room. I wasn't at practices. So, obviously the coaches didn't like something about Keenum, and they wanted Cousins, and so they got Cousins. But their stats, to me, didn't reflect much difference between them. They made some good moves in the off season so far. I don't know about them repeating, though, Mark. Mr. Hersh, you know, I wasn't saying that the Vikings are going to take the division this season. I'm just saying that they took it last season, so they do wear the crown, just like with all the other divisions. They're division winners. I really like what your Green Bay Packers have done, and I think with healthy Rodgers coming back, I just don't. I don't see the Vikings as well. I'm not going to say that they're not going to do it again. I just think that Am I getting ahead of myself picking somebody to win the division already? Yes, I am. So I'm not going to say that.
Blaine, I think it's clear that the Vikings are the odds-on favorites to repeat as the division champions. It's theirs for the taking, and Cousins may turn out to be fantastic. He didn't have anything going in Washington. The management didn't have any faith in him. They kept putting him on, restricted, and he just kept playing along. And it really turned out to be a surprise because I thought he was going to San Francisco.
Okay, well, let's hear what Mr. Mancini has to say.
Well, you bring up a great point, but you know what? I agree with what Mark Hersh said, because when you looked at Kirk Cousins in Washington, they were basically a pass-happy team that one year, and then they jet a couple of their receivers out of town, and Garcon went, and you saw Jackson go, and then it was strictly a running team. They were going to run the ball down your throat, but I think without Cousins in Washington the last couple of years, Washington doesn't do anything. I mean, all you have to do is look at what Cousins did in those games, even when they lost. He threw for over 200-something yards in some of these losses. So I think Kirk Cousins going to Minnesota gives him that much more to take apart, and he's got a better arsenal now in Minnesota than he had in Washington. Chris, I don't know if you agree with that, but Kirk Cousins, in my book, is a top-rated quarterback. I don't know what people don't see in this guy, but maybe they're just not looking at the Redskins and seeing wins and losses in Washington. But you take him out of the realm of the Redskins, man, they're a bottom feeder. Chris?
Well, Mark Mancini, the reason that he had so many yards is because he was throwing these short out passes all the time, and that's why there were no scores on the board. He wasn't driving the team downfield. He was racking up stats. He was getting a lot of receptions. He was getting some yards, but nothing was ever going anywhere. And I think that's what remains to be seen is how is he going to be able to drive a team into the end zone. Chris Rose, what do you think?
I think that one of the top offensive minds who drafted him, who, when he was OC, who coached him, who built him, who was looking for him, decided to take a flyer in a trade on a rookie, and then after a few games decided that he would be better to lead the team than the guy that he knows really well. And I think that's all I really gotta know about Cousins. We've talked a lot on the show about how he's notorious for, as opposed to handing the ball off or trying to push the ball down the field, doing the dekes and dunks to build stats. But his stats were never really that good. He did a lot of yards, but, wins, losses, touchdowns to interceptions, completion percentage, he had some good times, but he's also had some bad games, chokes in big games, can't deal with pressure. I mean, I don't think that Cousins is that good. As far as Case, one thing Cousins has done is he's done it multiple years in a row, and I think the Vikings would rather have that. Zimmerman's an old school guy, so I think they'd rather have that. But what Cousins does have in Minnesota is a much better receiving core than he did in Washington. Thielen, who was one of the top receivers in the league last year, they have a serious receiving core. They have backs that can catch the ball. They have Rudolph there. I mean, that team is loaded for – this is their window too. I think you're going to see some collisions with the Packers, the Vikings, the Rams, and some of the teams around the league. I know that for some reason Mancini just has this love affair with the Redskins and that whole group. I don't know why, but he does. So, Blaine, what do you want to say about this?
I just wanted to say, push back a little bit about, I'm not pushing back, but I just wanted to say also with Mr. Mancini that, Case Keenum was a winner too last year, and you look at the stats between Case Keenum and Cousins, and, Cousins has the advantage, but is really not a big difference, as far as what the numbers go. Now, I agree with you, Chris, that receiving core in Minnesota is going to be better for Kirk Cousins as well. But, again, that was the same receiving core that they had last year. So, what is it about Cousins that, that's going to really make me jump up and down for joy if I'm a Vikings fan that Case Keenum didn't do? So that's it.
Yeah, well, I think that Chris Rose raised a point that I hadn't really thought of before. Why in the world did Shanahan go with Garoppolo when he could have waited till the end of the season and made a big play for Kirk Cousins, who was his boy, who he brought in, who he coached, who he mentored? And you know what? I think there might be something to that line of thinking, and I think we're going to find out over the course of the next season. But whatever way it turns out, I certainly don't think that Shanahan is the loser, because I think Garoppolo is going to be a fantastic quarterback as well. So what does that leave us? It leaves us with the Bears. Give us a rundown, Mr. Chris Rose. What do you think about the Bears?
I love what they did as far as, number one, best thing they possibly could have done was getting rid of Jeff Fisher 2.0 and John Fox. It was obvious the team didn't really know what they wanted to do. He was stunting their new, QB's growth. Just so many problems, starting with that draft just the whole debacle with Glennon and how they embarrassed the poor guy. I mean, it was pretty bad. One of the things I talked about last year, and one of the few preseason picks I got right, is that people are underestimating this Bears defense, because I've always been a big fan of Vic Fangio. Especially like when he had that Niners defense, and he gets sacks and he gets pressured by staying home and staying disciplined, and he didn't quite have all the pieces he wanted. So they went and picked up the kid from Georgia, Raquan Smith, and a lot of people are kind of giving him a hard time about that pick. But what it is to me is Fangio knows his defense, and he is getting the guys that mean something to him. So while there might have been better players on the board at such a high pick, I think that they got the guy that they feel can fill in those gaps, can rush when they need to, and can stay home, play fast. That's what they need their linebackers to do. So I kind of like the pick. I like the fact that they're going out of their way to clear out some of these receivers that injury-prone, problematic for whatever reason. I'm sure they probably wish they had Alshon Jeffrey back. But
yeah, I was just going to say, you mean like Alshon Jeffrey?
Yeah, but that's last year. That's last year's regime. This new year, so they moved Meredith. They still have White, but I don't think that's going to last long. But they got the kid from Memphis, Anthony Miller, who I think is an absolute stud. They got Javon Wims. I'm not sure what he's going to do, but they're starting to build around Trubisky, which I think is important. And they have the running game. They have some blocking tight ends. They're really strengthening up that offensive line. They had a ton of injuries last year, a ton. But I think they're going to some. You're going to see a leap. Now, of course, this is a league of everyone's copycat, and everyone thinks because it just happened to someone else, it's going to happen to us. So I think that the idea that you're going to see another Goff, where he had a bad rookie year and then just jumped, is a little far-fetched, but it's not impossible. I definitely like the new coach. I think the new coach is doing things that a lot of other people should do. So what about you? What do you think about your hated rivals there, Mr. Hersh?
Well, I think last year the Bears proved that, and I agree with you, a pretty decent defense and a pretty decent running game will get you nothing in the NFL. And the problem with the Bears, and that's why I keep going back to this Alshon Jeffrey thing. I mean, they have one of the best wide receivers in, recent memory, and they let him go. And then they got a young quarterback that they draft that doesn't have any targets to throw to. It just doesn't make sense. And trying to build up from nothing through the draft, I don't think we're going to see results on that right away. Of course, it could happen, but any new receivers that are coming in, how long is it going to take them to prove themselves one way or the other? I think the Bears have a long way to go. If I was tempted to make any predictions, I would say they're going to end up at the bottom of the division again, bottom of the NFC North, and keep on building as best they can. I think that Trubisky hasn't had any help to show what he can really do. And also where it hurts him is that when you don't have anybody to throw to, you don't develop your timing, you don't get used to doing your reads. It just becomes a mess. And that was the last year with the Bears defensive and run team. And, the offense never got started, and I think they're starting from scratch again. Blaine?
Well, I think it comes down to what you just alluded to is Trubisky. I don't see, we can't expect a Jared Goff type of turnaround. Jordan Howard, how much are you going to rely on him? Trubisky's got to throw the ball, but who's he going to throw it to? Their top receiver had a high of 378 yards. That was Taylor Gabriel. All of the receivers were in the 300s, except for the top three receivers, Bellamy, Fowler, and Gabriel. They ran the ball a lot. Trubisky's got to throw the ball. 7 interceptions, 7 touchdowns. I'm not going to do it. I don't see it happening this year. I don't see, a jump. I have no reason to believe in Trubisky at this point, but that's why they play the season. I think it's going to be a run-heavy offense again, with Howard again, and I have to go with you, Mr. Hersh. I'll put him at the bottom of the division. I think I'm going to see. I'm going to go with Green Bay, Minnesota, Detroit, and the Bears. They're good on defense still. I'll give them that. But they need to build that offense. And who was the player that they let go to New Orleans who was hurt last year?
Meredith, Cameron Meredith.
Meredith. Yeah. Why'd they let him go? You don't have anybody to replace him.
Same reason they let Alshon Jeffrey go. What is going on down there in the Windy City?
Yeah. But that's a different regime, though. Meredith and Alshon were for different reasons. But you look at last year. You have to understand John Fox. I mean, it's just like when we were judging Gurley because what's Mr. 7 and 9's name? Jeff Fisher was running Gurley straight into the butt of his center every play. There's going to be some differences because I think they did what he asked them to do, but they wouldn't throw the ball, and they would run him to the left, only use half the field. I mean, it was embarrassingly bad. Nagy, I think, is going to bring a fresh view to it, and there's something that has to be said. Hey, you know what? If we're going to give this new coach a chance, then let's give him a chance. Let's see what he can do. And he's done some good things with quarterbacks in the past. With Marcus Mariota and some of the other people he's coached in the past. So I think it'll be interesting to see what they actually put together. But you guys are forgetting they picked up Allen Robinson in free agency. They have a number 1 receiver. They have a few of them. So I mean, it's they're going after some targets. They have some people. And then they got Trey Burton, who was probably besides, and Ertz is a stud, but Trey Burton, when Ertz was hurt, was an absolute monster in the receiving game for the Eagles. Look at the games he had, especially in the playoffs and towards the end there. I mean, he's a stud. They're picking up some serious weapons. I think that they're gonna surprise some people. I think NFC North is one of the tougher divisions in the league. So if they did end up getting last there, it would be because they had to play some of the other tough teams twice. But I think that people need to watch out about the Bears, and I really like what Nagy's doing so far. And, to get rid of that regime like Fox and like doing stupid stuff like getting rid of Alshon Jeffrey, I think that you're going to see a bit of a turnaround with the new coaching staff in Chicago. I hope so, just because I like watching NFC North when it's more competitive.
Yeah, well, one of your favorite tricks when we were picking them last year was picking the Bears over my Packers and Mr. Rose. And the only reason that I think that went is because no Aaron Rodgers. But about Trubisky.
I picked the Bears at home. I picked the Bears at home a lot, and I got some huge upsets during the pick'ems. I don't know. I don't know what you see, but go ahead.
About Trubisky, I don't think he's really had a chance to show what he can do based on his surrounding cast. And he was supposed to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but they didn't give him a knife. Or they didn't give him something to open up the package with. And I think he might actually turn out to be a pretty good quarterback down the road. So if they give him some weapons, and it looks like they're making efforts to do that, the Bears could have a turnaround. Because you're right, they've got a solid defense and they've got a running game. And if you've got a quarterback that's working and you've got a good defense and you've got a good running game, come on, that's what it takes to win in any league, in any one of these divisions. So maybe the Bears are going to be a surprise. And having said that, I will like to thank Baltimore Blaine for picking my Packers. I think that, they're a dark horse to win the division. I certainly don't think it's an impossibility, but time will tell. So go ahead, Blaine.
I just don't. I mean, I understand, Chris, that they added Robinson, but I just don't see how he's going to be. Robinson alone is going to be the difference maker on that offense. If Trubisky can't get him the ball, and what I would say is that
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the building blocks. I mean, this year.
Oh,
I mean, Robinson only had like one season over 1,000 yards so far. That was in 2015. And 2016 he was at 883 and 7. He was hurt last year, right? Yeah, ACL.
Yeah.
And he only had played one game. Yeah. And again, that's I'm interested. I was curious rather to see or find out why Cam Meredith wasn't good enough, and Robinson is. They were both injured last year.
Well, the injury is very different, and Cam Meredith kind of came on at the very end and has never really done it before. He came on at the end of his rookie season when they were having to throw to catch up with McCown just bombing him the ball 10 times in a row. And they just didn't feel it, for whatever reason. They didn't want to pick up his deal. That's one of those things when you're talking about gauging injuries. That's something that, you never get released and never get the real story for. So I would just be speculating.
We'll leave it up to the medical teams.
Yeah, unless they're in Baltimore, stay away from your guys. They'll fail you. They'll fail you or pass you depending on whatever the little high sign the management gives them on the fly.
We got a good record.
Oh wait, is someone else? Oh, you're done. You're done. Yeah.
Leave my Ravens.
But I think one of my favorite draft picks, and we'll talk about this as we move forward. I'm not going to reach it tonight. Is the kid that they picked up. Yeah, my dog likes him too. The kid they picked up from the Niners picked up. I've been doing some research on him, so I'm gonna release some of my favorite picks here coming up. I think right now I'm gonna say that I don't want to make a pick, and I'm not disrespecting the Packers saying that they can't get it. I wouldn't be surprised to see Green Bay and Minnesota in the championship game. That's how highly I think about those teams. But I want to see some games. I want to see how camp works out before I get too happy about picking people off of what they have from last year in college tape. Mr. Hersh, final thoughts on the NFC North?
Yeah, you'll notice that I didn't make any picks except that I think that the Bears are going to be at the bottom. And, look how wrong I was about the NFC South last year. I picked New Orleans to be at the bottom there, and I thought that Tampa was going to rise up. And, the other two were going to be in the middle there, the Falcons and the Panthers. And how wrong could I be? I'm embarrassed about that. And I guess I just didn't see it, but the Saints turned out to be the powerhouse over there. So you never know.
I think they will be again. So here's a quick question for you, and just a fun question I thought of. I'll go to Blaine, you first, and then Mr. Hersh. Who is this year's Tampa? Who is the team that you guys keep hearing about? They've already basically given them the trophy for division winner. Who's the team you keep hearing about that's going to be so great that you think is going to fall flat on their face? You, Blaine? Go first.
Flat on their face. There are several teams that I can pick. First one that comes to mind is the Cowboys.
Just one.
Because they haven't done. Okay, all right.
Who are people hyping up that
that's
you think are going to fall? Remember last year in the offseason? Remember last year in the offseason, everyone was all about the Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is the best thing since sliced bread. They're going to go and they're going to win everything.
Right.
Well, this. You're going to take only one. Go ahead.
No. I there's so many that can fall into that category. I don't want to just leave it at the Cowboys. I'm going to pass.
See, I think people have been I think people. We'll come back to you, but I think you can go after Hersh. But I think people have been talking bad about the Cowboys. I don't think anyone's been propping them up. So here, we'll give you a second shot after Hersh. Hersh, go ahead. Who's your team?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's been talking up the Cowboys either. And the team that's getting talked up the most, I think, has got to be the Los Angeles Rams. But I'm hesitant to pick them because I think they might be the real deal. So I'm going to have to go with Oakland. I think that people that are talking about Oakland is going to be
that's mine.
The black hole is going to open up. I think that that's not going to happen for them. And I like the lightning round, by the way.
Go ahead, Blaine.
One more thing.
One more thing. Lightning round doesn't compete with Blaine.
I'll be way back in California now. All right, so I'm going to pick a team. I'm going to go Jaguars. Just for one player and one player alone. Blake Bortles.
Oh, really?
That's a good pick, actually.
Yeah, but who's talking up the Jaguars? That's the question.
Oh, they
went all the way to the playoffs. They could have gone, pretty far. I mean, that's a Super Bowl contending team. That's in their top 5 or top 4 to go to the Super Bowl from the AFC, according to a lot of people.
And I think the Texans are going to have something to say about that.
We'll see.
Well, I think you're right about that because they're getting their quarterback again, and they've got some defense to back it up. I think you might be right about that, Blaine. But are they going to be overhyped? I don't think anybody's talking about them.
Well, they have been since the season. They've been the moves that they made during the off season. The Jaguars are getting stronger, and they've had.
They went all the way to They got deep into the playoffs. They beat some of the best teams. They beat the pants off of Ben and the Steelers in Pittsburgh. I mean, just destroyed them during the regular season last year when the Steelers. Well, I mean, the Steelers went to went all the way to one game away. So it's.
Well, I think they had one of those seasons.
The AFC is just bad compared to the NFC.
All right.
Hey,
it's not even close. It's not even close.
I want to throw out a lightning round question here.
Can I answer my lightning round question first?
Well, I guess maybe.
I think that everyone's been talking up. This will be it. Lightning. I think everyone's been talking up the Niners. They've already decided that those last games from Garoppolo and that the kid wonder and Shanahan is good. It's a tough thing to choose because obviously, the idea is someone that just looks obviously like they've got to win. But I think that there's someone that has a chance to just kind of fall short of expectations because no one's saying a single bad thing about him and beat the Niners. So, all right, give us your lightning round question, and we'll close out, Mr. Mancini.
All right, my lightning round question is, what team that everybody's saying is terrible do you think is going to be a big surprise? And I'm going to put this over first to Baltimore Blaine.
Okay, going to be it's terrible. It's going to be a big surprise. Jeez. That's a tough one.
You need a lifeline?
I go first. I'll go first, and then you think about it. Well, I've looked at a bunch of stuff that has the Seahawks going to the bottom of the division this year, being last place. So I'm going to stick with my boys and say, nope. I believe in the coaching staff. I believe in the players, even though it's been a big purge. I believe that they're going to kind of turn that culture around. I don't think that they're going to be the same team they were, but I think that they're not going to be in last place in some of these other ridiculous picks that people think. Blaine, you got one now?
Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb and do the same thing I did last year and say Chargers.
That's not those guys are good.
Aren't they supposed to be bad?
No.
There's
well,
no team, there's no team that
you know what I think.
What about? Yeah. Ravens?
No, I mean think about the Chargers.
Oh.
But I wouldn't have picked them. Go ahead, Blaine. Why do you think the Chargers are going to surprise everybody?
Because I think they've been playing under circumstances with injuries, and the last couple of seasons the Chargers haven't been what's the word I'm looking for? They haven't put on the field or shown what they are totally capable of. I think there's a lot more to that team, a lot more talent on that team, and I think that they're going to make the playoffs this year.
They're going to win the division. Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. Hersh, who's your team?
Well, I have to admit that when we were talking about the Rams and we were talking about the 49ers, the Seahawks did come into my mind, but I would have picked them to be a team that everybody thinks is bad that's going to do something. I mean, I don't think the Seahawks are that bad. I think that, it's a toss-up for me, and everybody's going to laugh, between the Browns and the Cardinals. I think that the Cardinals have got some quarterbacks in there, and they could actually pull off some type of surprise or something. But
I like that.
I'm going to go with you with the Browns. I like the Browns thing. Browns are going to surprise people.
Well, I know it's a toss-up for me. I would actually like to see the Cardinals surprise somebody, because they were a team that, at least in my living memory, was great at one time, and the Browns are not. I mean, I guess they deserve a kick at the cat.
Well, don't forget the Cardinals, the engine of the Cardinals defense, and one of the top 3 best players in the league got hurt in the first game last year, in David Johnson. So I mean, that was devastating to them, and then their quarterback went down. So I mean, last year that Cardinals team's got a lot of pop to it. They got a lot of players. All right, Mr. Mancini, go ahead and tell us why the.
I just wanted to say to Mr. Mancini just informed us all that we're going to be drug tested at the end of the show.
Okay. Mr. Mancini, why don't you tell us why the Redskins are going to be a surprise, and then take us home?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. With about 3 something left in this show, I listen to this show. It's better than the NFL today. You guys are amazing, man. And you guys got to pat yourselves on the back with the knowledge and everything you're bringing these listeners. But I like the Redskins, and you I know where Chris is going to go on this. You always hang your hat on the Skins in the NFC, but I like Alex Smith. They lose Kirk Cousins, but they pick up Alex Smith. I think, Jay Gruden is going to, implicate, a lot of things here in Washington now. They had a lot of injuries, guys, last year. You saw their running attack. They lost a lot of guys. I think the Redskins are going to be a team that everybody's kind of writing off that will resurface there. I'll tell you one thing. I don't think they're going to challenge Philadelphia, but I think they're probably better than the Giants, and they're just as good as the Cowboys. So we'll find out. But I think Washington can be a real surprise in the NFC. In the AFC, I'm going to, everybody's going kind of with the front runners and everything. As crazy as this may sound, I'm going to go with Baltimore Blaine. I think you better look at the Ravens, because I think the Ravens are going to be a team a lot of people aren't really pointing to that is going to damage. Well, I'm telling you, the Ravens are always there every year. The Ravens are there every year. When do you see the Ravens usually out of it? They'll hit that stretch in mid-season, but every year they're right at the end knocking on the door for a playoff. I like the Ravens as the AFC team.
I appreciate your love, and I accept your love.
I would have never said the Ravens were a team that people were going to say was bad. I think they would have said the Ravens are going to be in the middle. So if you're talking about a surprise that they go higher than the middle, maybe you're right, Mr. Mancini. Take us home.
Yeah, what a great show. And next week, I know you guys will break down another division. Should have a guest on next week for that division. We'll find it out. I know you guys have the Knucklehead Podcast, Spreaker.com. I mean, just so many avenues. And, again, this show is also on iTunes. Search Mancini Sports, blogtalkradio.com/Mancini Sports. Everybody gets it on the XM203, Sirius 214, ESP Nation, and American Forces Network come Friday night. So great platform across the board. And I know with the stables and the cross-promotion across the stables, I know tomorrow we will have Shut the Puck Up Hockey Show, 4 o'clock p.m. Pacific, followed by The Junction. That's Renee Lazier, Chuck Friedman, and Dawn Morgan. And then Thursday we're back with it with Hardwood and Hoops with the guys, followed by the All Access Los Angeles And then on Friday, Diversity in the 21st Century, and that'll be followed by the XM show. For Chris Rose, Mark Hersh in Green Bay, Blaine Thompson in Baltimore with the Ravens, I'm Mark Mancini. We'll talk to you next Tuesday, 6 o'clock on the West Coast, 9 o'clock on the East, 8 o'clock Central. Have a great evening. Thanks very much.
Bye.